now I am very delighted to introduce General David W. Allvin, the Chief of Staff of the United States Air Force, who's speaking at this conference for the first time. Now, he's been a leading advocate of interoperability, integration, and agile operations throughout his distinguished career. So we're really looking forward to hearing him speak today. Please do welcome him.
Well, good morning. First, my thanks to the Air and Space Power Association for putting this together. As was mentioned, this is my first time, and I am very honored to be here. I look out amongst my fellow air chiefs and industry and academia. This is a powerhouse audience, so I'm not going to lie to you. I got a little edge this morning, a little chip on my shoulder, just because this is my first time, and as I look at day two, the threshold for impressing keeps going up and up and up. Each of the panels has been very spectacular. I mean, I get it. We're on the second day. You take your lot in life, and now I'm on the same time block with Minister Pollard and Cass Knighton. Are you kidding me? But that's okay. I'm a guest in their country. I'll speak when I'm told to speak. But I think the straw that broke the camel's back, I mean, you were all here yesterday. My fellow American service chief, General Saltzman. I mean, what the hell was that? I mean, Thucydides to Brody, Athens to space. And it was sophisticated, it was educational, it was comprehensive, it was professorial, and it was downright erudite. And yes, I had to look at the thesaurus last night to see what that word means just so I could impress you. So, high bar. So I'm not even going to try and clear that, because as I was listening, especially with Rich, there's so much in common with the way that I think and the way that he has spoken much more eloquently. So a lot of this is going to be what you've heard and reinforcing, just said a different way. But I figure I got to put more words in it than just say, yeah, what he said. I'll never get invited back. But I want to start the conversation with the way that I start most conversations lately, because you may have heard within our United States Air Force, we are currently undergoing a journey that we're looking at reoptimizing our Air Force, the institution of our Air Force, to adapt to the environment within which we find ourselves. And as we're buying new kit and we're looking at future capabilities, but we need to do some introspection and look at our processes, the way we develop our people, the way we project power, the way we develop capabilities, the way we generate readiness, are those right for the time? And as we do that, we looked in those four basic areas, and we need to look back and see what our Air Force has done and what we've adapted to. Now, I wasn't good enough to go all the way back to the Peloponnesian War, but I just went back to the Cold War. And when we think about that, we look at what our Air Force was optimized for. How did we project power? From large installations at wings, with wings forward to mature infrastructure within Europe, as we were going galvanized against the Warsaw Pact and going against the Soviet Union coming in the Fulda Gap. So that's how we projected power into these sort of mature infrastructure. We developed capabilities. We knew we couldn't outmass them, so what did we do? We were focused on the threat, and we looked at stealth and precision, and that's how we were going to do it, but we were galvanized against a single threat. And then 9th of November 1989 came. I was fortunate enough to be in Germany at the time, and the wall came down, and suddenly the environment shifted. And fairly rapidly, we found ourselves without an existential threat to go against, but we still had our same Air Force. So when Desert Storm came along, we still did like we were going to do in the Cold War, which is we picked up from wings, but we didn't have the forward infrastructure to go into, so we did the same thing into expeditionary bases. Took us 6 months to get there, but that didn't matter. We owned the shot clock. And then after that happened, the Desert Storm happened, then we find ourselves with myriad industry and not too many mouths and not enough to feed them. So, many in industry look back in the history and hear about the Last Supper in summer 1993, when the fact of the matter is we did not have a threat that would justify resourcing. So we did what Rich was talking about. We solved for efficiency. And so that was the extravaganza of mergers and acquisitions in industry, and that changed the relationship to fewer, bigger industry partners, and it changed the behavior in the relationship between us. But we didn't have that existential threat to go against, so we were sort of adapted to that situation. 9/11 came along, and our Air Force suddenly was not really asked to do what it had traditionally been trained to do. We didn't need to go in and roll back the integrated air defense system, establish and maintain air superiority, and set the conditions for an unfair combined arms fight. That's not what we needed to do. They needed us to do on-clock close air support, unblinking ISR, ensure the golden hour, we could make sure more and more of the forces that were in combat could survive. Pieces of our Air Force, that's what the Joint Force needed, and that's what the Coalition Force needed. But that's not what our Air Force had been before, so we adapted to that. So the way we projected power was largely by crowdsourcing. We would put together folks and we'd go and meet in the theater, and sometimes that's the first time you'd meet, which was okay for the time. It was okay for the environment. But that's not the way it is anymore. We cannot afford, if we are going to enter, potentially, be ready to enter into a fight against a well-armed, well-trained adversary, we can't be meeting up in theater and saying, hi, I'm Dave, I'm going to be your commander, let's go get him. Can't do that. You have to train together as a unit, coherently, practice. So all of those things we sort of looked at, this is how we got to where we are. But we're still doing things, in many of the cases, like we were post 9/11, in that environment. There wasn't a seminal event like 9/11 that brought us from that environment to this. And so we have to wake ourselves up and adapt to this and understand that we have to think differently to be ready. So as we did this in the United States Air Force, we started looking at what is it about the environment that is different? What are the unique characteristics of the environment now that are drawing us to have to change the way that we do our processes, our practices, develop capabilities, et cetera? And one of the things, there's several, I'm just going to pull on one thread, was really about, it's not only just the digitization, but it's the pace of change, as Rich talked about, this technological advancement and how fast it's coming at us. And it has an impact. And for the last over a century, we've had technological advances that have made our lives better and advanced society and really have done things for us as individuals and as groups that have really changed our lives. But what's happening is it's going faster and faster and faster. So it's not just that technology is advancing in society, it is that pace of change. And when you're in an environment where the pace of change is, dare I say, unprecedented, we have to think about what that means. How much can we trust the past to predict the future? That line is no longer straight. We're living in a nonlinear environment where we may not be able to draw that line as clearly. And so in order to do that, in order to optimize in this sort of environment of rapid change, we also need to reevaluate some of the underlying value propositions that we've had and how we make our decisions. One of the main, I think one of the most popular value propositions of the 20th century was this one, built to last. And that was something, if you did something that was built to last, that had value. But there was an underlying assumption. That assumption was that whatever you were building was going to be relevant for as long as it lasted. That brought the value. I want that for us. It's going to be the dominant X, Y, or Z for the next fill in the blank. We need to think about that because sometimes that value proposition can become an albatross if it's still functioning, but it's not as effective. And when we think about it, our United States Air Force still has a large majority of its capabilities, if not delivered, at least designed and developed in an environment with this value proposition. So now when we're trying to become agile, we need to be clear-eyed about the fact that it's not going to happen automatically because some of these systems were not designed with this value proposition in mind. If we had to do it all over again, maybe we'd do something like this. That doesn't really roll off the tongue. Built to adapt. It's not quite as powerful. But this is the paradigm. This is the value proposition we need to be reconsidering more. So built to adapt. And I've been thinking about this for a long time. I wrote on this over 10 years ago when we put together the then Air Force Future Operating Concept and talked about the concept of operational agility. And I feel more strongly about it today than I did then. And I think when we think about agility, it's a combination of several things that allows you to stay on the balls of your feet. You know you're not going to be fully right in the future, but when you're wrong, you have the ability to get right quicker. And what does that mean? It's a combination of all these attributes. One or two of them might be interesting, but it's a combination of all of them. You can still generate power. You can still take a punch. You can still move. You can get your balance. And some of these you can see, Rich was talking about a little bit. How about a balance of high-low capability? How about the flexibility to move from one domain to another? How about the coordination that comes with command and control? These things relate and they translate very well to what we do in air and space power. And so the idea of solving for agility has become an obsession of mine, because we cannot trust that the past is going to deliver the future in the way that we have envisioned it. So we always say, trust your gut. I'd like to add the Reagan thing on there, say, trust but verify your gut. Make sure those things that you're biased against are still relevant today. And agility is something that exists in nature, and it exists in air power, if you will. So when you think of what does that take, this paired is speed, strength, agility, coordination. That's a natural thing for us who live and work in the air domain. But I'll tell you, just because you're individually agile, that doesn't guarantee collective agility. I mean, this is... I think we've all been in operations that look like this a little bit. So that individual agility is necessary but not sufficient, because when you have collective agility, the ability to be agile as a formation, as a coalition, as an international fighting force, maybe it looks something a little bit more like this. When you think about that, it's for a collective purpose. How are they doing that? I mean, they are interfacing, communicating, sensing with each other to have a coherent form. I don't know what that formation is trying to do, but they're all sort of acting together and in unison. And there's something to that. That's real power. That is real power in the battle space that I believe we're going to see in the future. And so that's why I think about it as collective agility. How do we do that? How do we move from the individual level to collective agility, especially when we have much of our kit was built and designed in the era of it's most important just to build to last? I think we've had some examples of that. I mean, when in the middle of April, when the Iranians had that mass launch on Israel, we came together as a coalition and in impressive fashion thwarted that. That was collective agility, but it wasn't natural. It happened because of years and years of flying and fighting together. But it also happened on the backs of several airmen, Space Force members, our guardians, putting together on their backs of really hard work that probably was harder than it needs to be in the future, because these systems were not designed to operate together, but we made them, and they worked. I think this is a little bit of a glimpse into the future. I think this is the type of battle space, this is the type that we're going to see, but at larger scale. So the question becomes, how much can we depend upon this stitching together and having effectiveness in the battle space on this scale, night after night, day after day? I mean, we see it in Ukraine on the joint front as well, putting pieces together. Now, there is a necessity there that is driving that innovation faster and faster, but still, this is a collective agility that's hard work, and it's manual labor intensively. How do we get to that point like that flock of birds? When you think about it, theirs is almost biologically developed over years and years and hundreds and thousands. They have sensors. I'm not going to get into the science of it because I'll get out of my depth very quickly, but they have the sensors that communicate with each other as a group, working together. It's natural because it's not just in the hardware, but it's built into their DNA. And this is where we need to start thinking about collective agility. Agility as a platform is interesting. Agility of systems, I think, is compelling. That's why one of the things that we're looking at within our United States Air Force is looking at working systems over platforms. If you think about it historically, we built platforms for a purpose. And on that platform, you need a system. I need radar, I need some EW kit, I need a ComNav suite, I need to be able to have munitions on this. And you build it around the platform. And you've got a magnificent platform that is built to last. Off you go. And then there's another platform that does the same thing, and we spend all our money, time, and resources trying to hook the two of them up together at great expense. But if you have the common set of systems, the common architecture, the common data standards, those things that enable, regardless of the platform, to fit together as long as they share this systems approach, now you have the ability to upgrade at the speed of software, at the speed of coding. And you think about the platforms as the wrappers that you put around those systems. then you can have a balanced capability mix and know how to talk to each other because it's at the systems level they are integrated. That's what I believe the future is. How we get there, I got to tell you, there's all sorts of reasons why it's tough, right? Each of our nations has that. We have our own policy, and industry has incentives as well that sometimes are at odds. And Rich talked about this, that we have to adapt industry and government. We have to adapt together to understand how we can still both meet our own objectives and develop capabilities that are right for the time. How do we do that? We're moving out on that in the United States Air Force. Now, admittedly, this is not going to happen overnight because, as I said, we still have a large amount of our kit that was not designed that way. But we have an opportunity now, together, as international forces, to think about how we do this. Because if you design it in, if you bake it in rather than bolt it on, you have a better opportunity to be collectively agile and to be able to dominate the battle space in air and space because your systems are talking together regardless of the platforms around which they develop. And you can move from an Air Force, which is a set of international air forces that are powerful unto themselves, but maybe not collectively, and move it into a formation that is true power at scale, at speed, in the dynamic battle space that we see. So I think we can do this together. I think the environment calls for it, and I think this is the edge that we can deliver over potential adversaries. So with that, thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it.